As we bask in the radiant light of this Easter season, the Alleluia rings out not merely as a pious tradition, but as an affirmation of a historical earthquake. To believe in the resurrection is not an act of blind feeling, it is a response to a documented event that shattered the expectations of the first century. To understand the resurrection's historical weight, we must first look at the Roman and Jewish context. In the eyes of the Roman authorities, Jesus of Nazareth was a common insurrectionist. His execution by crucifixion, a most shameful death, was intended to be a final, crushing blow. As the Roman historian Tacitus records in his Annals, Christ suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. Rome was efficient at killing. Nobody survived a Roman crucifixion. Yet, despite this grim certainty, something changed. The primary sources, our Gospels and the Epistles, point to an empty tomb that no one could explain away. Had the body of Jesus been stolen, the Jewish or Roman authorities would have produced it to silence the burgeoning movement. They never did. Even more compelling is the criterion of embarrassment. In the first century, the testimony of women was not legally valid in Jewish courts. If the apostles were inventing a story, they would never have chosen Mary Magdalene and the other women as the primary witnesses to the empty tomb. As New Testament scholar N.T. Wright argues in The Resurrection of the Son of God, the early church's insistence on these female witnesses is a powerful indicator that they were reporting what actually happened, however inconvenient it was for their social standing. Furthermore, we must account for the radical transformation of the apostles. These were men who fled in terror on Good Friday. Yet, weeks later, they were boldly proclaiming the risen Lord in the very streets where he was condemned. Men do not die for a known lie. St. Paul, writing a mere 20 years after the event, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, lists over 500 witnesses who saw the risen Christ, many of whom were still alive to be questioned. This wasn't a legend that developed over centuries. It was an explosion of testimony that occurred while the eyewitnesses were still walking the earth. Even non-biblical sources like Flavius Josephus in the Antiquities of the Jews acknowledge that Jesus' followers reported him appearing alive to them 3 days after his death. While scholars debate the exact phrasing, the historical footprint remains. A group of disillusioned Jews suddenly became convinced that they had seen their crucified master alive, prompting them to change their day of worship from Saturday to Sunday, a tectonic shift in Jewish life that requires a monumental cause. The resurrection is the pivot point of history. It is the moment where God's new creation broke into our linear time. I encourage you to see that our faith is grounded in the real events of history. We believe because it is true. He is risen indeed.